water, earth, fire, air.
Sorry, that was the wrong one. Let me play the actual one. My bad.
Boxing, weaving, sneaking, shooting. The four niggas lived together in harmony until the sneaking nation attacked.
Okay, this is the last time. Let me actually find the right one. I don't know who's in charge of editing, but they're doing a really piss poor job right now. Let me find the actual one. Give me 2 seconds.
Earth, fire, air, water.
Perfect. You got all that? Great. Awesome. Sorry about that. But anyway, I don't know why I keep talking about cartoons. One day I'll switch it up, but for right now, just shut the fuck up and bear with me. We're gonna talk about some serious shit today, all right? A lot of cartoons get held in a really high regard of what actually is the best cartoon. Some people would say it's Teen Titans, which honestly is a fair argument, but Teen Titans didn't actually finish with the proper ending, so I don't like putting that show in that argument. But still, it is a good show nonetheless. That boy Robin was really knee-dropping niggas from 20 feet in the air and fist-fighting illusions. I know Slade hate to see that nigga coming. Some people would actually say it's Adventure Time, which I would also agree to if I actually finished the damn show. I know. Shut up. I'm gonna finish it eventually, but for right now, leave me alone. But you gotta cut me some slack. For me, it was either that or Regular Show, and I fucking love Regular Show. That hot dog episode, we all know what I'm talking about. The hot dog episode is by far the craziest episode in cartoon history. Come on now. Some people would also say The Amazing World of Gumball, which I 100% agree. Don't agree? Argue with your mama.
Shh, here he comes. He didn't see it. Draws attention to it. Make a wallet sound. Wallet. That's not the sound a wallet makes.
Truthfully, this list can't go as long as you want it to be because in the 90s and the 80s, there were so many good top tier cartoons. But before we get into actually that, we got to talk about what came before what we're going to talk about today. And by that, I mean that we can't talk about Legend of Korra yet until we talk about the GOAT that actually started it all and paved the way for what is a good show. And yes, I'm talking about... Sorry, that wasn't what I meant to show. Who the fuck is in charge of editing? Anyway, let's actually show what I want to show in the first place. We can't talk about Legend of Korra without talking about The Last Airbender. In this day and age, I don't know a single person who hasn't heard of this show. But if you've been living under a rock or you just got defrosted, let me bring you up to speed really quick. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a cartoon where people can telekinetically manipulate all 4 of the world's elements, that being fire, earth, air, and water. And these are all practiced under a practice known as bending. I don't know why I said practice twice, but I wrote it, so I'm sorry. And bending is also heavily inspired by Chinese martial arts, which is cool as shit. In the show, there is only one individual who can bend all 4 of the elements. They're known as the Avatar. And just a quick tidbit to let you know that the Avatar can be anyone from any of the 4 nations. So it's like a reincarnation kind of thing where the same person won't have it. You know what I mean? You know how reincarnation works. The Avatar's duty, or better yet, their responsibility, is to keep peace and harmony throughout the 4 nations. But they also serve as a link between the spiritual world and the physical world. And here's like a quick brief summary of like The Last Airbender without spoiling a lot of shit, so you can actually watch the show and see for yourself.
The boulder feels conflicted about fighting a young blind girl.
The story follows Katara, who is a waterbender, and her brother Sokka, who is not a waterbender, but still a good character nonetheless. And they both end up finding a young boy named Aang, who was frozen in an iceberg. They soon find out that 12-year-old Aang is actually the Avatar that went missing 100 years ago. And because of Aang's disappearance, the Fire Nation decided to take over and wage war with all the remaining nations, and kind of also ultimately win. And where the title comes in is that Aang is actually the last airbender. Once the Fire Nation found out that the next Avatar was going to be an airbender, they went out and eradicated the entirety of the air nomads. So the story just follows Aang, Katara, and Sokka and other friends they meet along the way as they help Aang figure out how to bend all 4 elements, as well as stopping the Fire Nation and wreaking havoc around the world. And I get it, that's a lot, but it's a really good show. Now that you're caught up with Avatar: The Last Airbender, I recommend watching the actual show. It dives really deep in its messages, like acceptance and grief and depression and loneliness and dealing with a lot of responsibilities at a young age. age. The list goes on how much this show really carried on its back. The rabbit hole for this can go insanely deep. On top of that, the writing and direction is like beyond what we've seen in cartoons up to this date. Like, people call this the best cartoon for a reason. This is like the Naruto for Americans. It was really that good. But now that you have a proper understanding of what Avatar is, let's talk about Legend of Korra and why people hate the fuck out of this show for no reason. Now, I notice I've been talking for a minute and I hadn't put a meme into the video yet. So it's a gorilla underwater real quick to get your attention again.
Life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above. If you would tell me.
Okay, we good? Perfect. There are 3 bases I want to cover as to why people hate this show so dearly. And I will be sitting here defending all 3 of these bases. I will not be shitting on the show entirely, except for book 2. Bro, I fucking hate book 2. But that's a whole other argument. I'm telling you right now. But let me bring this back real quick. Right now, I'm going to go over the first 3 bases of why people really despise this show. So let's kind of go into it and start at base 1. That being during The Last Airbender, there was and currently is a active war taking place throughout the show. It isn't until Aang actually shows up that they have a chance of winning said war. But also keep in mind, Aang is a fucking child.
One thing worse than a rapist, boom, a child.
Aang is at least 12 years old when he gets frozen, and he's even 12 years old when he gets thawed out of that bitch. One of the viewers' biggest complaint about Legend of Korra was that, oh, it's too lighthearted. There's not enough at stake. No shit, Sherlock. There's not a war anymore. Aang, in the long run, went to accomplish what he was supposed to do, which was peace and harmony throughout the 4 nations. How boring would Legend of Korra be if it was just a copy and paste of The Last Airbender? Truth be told, not very entertaining. I say this to say the tone shift in Legend of Korra was a very smart thing to do, especially in a writing standpoint. As to what conflicts can the next Avatar face that can be on the same weight scale as The Last Airbender. It gives the writers a challenge to really experiment of what actually works. In some ways, more than one. Like, they did really good and they did really bad. Did I fucking mention book 2?
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Anyway, that's just the gist of base 1. People just hate that Legend of Korra is just not as heavy as Avatar for some reason. I digress. Let's move on to base 2. That being the second gripe people have with this show is how inherently the spirit world is tied to the plot, but also how it is accessible to everyone, including the lion, the witch, and the fucking wardrobe. And truthfully, I get it. There are definitely some moments in the show where I'm like, why the fuck are there fucking bunny fairies running around all over the place? What is this? But then I remember that the spirit world is just a parallel world of paranormal and supernatural entities that just parallel the real world's life and nature and all that other shit. So where there are super pure spirits, like of an innocent child, there are also super dark spirits, like spirits of an innocent child. The reason why Aang's spirit world was so dark and brooding and dreadful is because that's what he felt on the inside during all of it. Like, all of it. You try being a goddamn 12-year-old being responsible for saving the goddamn world in the span of a week and tell me you won't have nightmares? Get out of here. Also in book 2 of Legend of Korra, we get the origins of who and what the Avatar is and how they became the Avatar. It is honestly really cool, but also really bad. Like, they did really cool shit and they also did really bad shit, but it was never bad enough to just flat out say it's ass. Again, I can't attest for book 2. I wish I could, but I can't. But it was honestly never that bad. If you say it was that bad, grow up. Now for our last base, we have base 3, and base 3 being Korra herself. Now, listen, some people are just grown adult sexes and can't stand a female being in power or being a protagonist. Me though, I eat that shit up. People who have a sense of a brain will actually judge Korra on her actual character. She's brash, she's rude at sometimes, she doesn't know when to shut the fuck up and take a L, and she's also hella stubborn. But I truly think that's what makes her a really good Avatar. You have to realize that Aang was a monk, so he was mostly raised in a non-violent fashion. He always reserved and not taking violent action whenever there was ever a conflict that ever came in front of him. Korra, on the other hand, popped out as a tomboy and was ready to fuck some shit up, which is honestly cool as fuck, because some niggas need their ass beat. Like, the first time she steps into civilization and she witnesses a crime, she doesn't talk to them and treat them nicely. No, she beats the break off these motherfuckers. People call her rude and stubborn, but you gotta remember, she was a sheltered child and then soon teenager. Where Aang wanted to have fun and go see the world and explore because he was a child, Korra wanted to fall in love. Korra wanted to live up to people's expectations. She wanted to truly see where she belonged, like any normal fucking teenager. People hate on Korra for just being herself, and I can't live with that. Yes, there are some things she did in the show that had more questions than answers that was completely unspeakable, like breaking a fucking home. But did we not also do weird shit when we were teenagers? I will defend the show to my dying breath. I don't care. But Legend of Korra is truly a show that will stand to the test of time, except for book 2. I cannot justify how bad book 2 is. I can't. Maybe not big enough to hold its scale to The Last Airbender, but enough to keep it alive to where it can still be good on its own. With all that being said, let's talk about the most slept on show of Nickelodeon history and cartoon history, The Legend of Korra. The story starts off on how Aang and his friends were able to bring an end to the 100-Year War. Aang and Fire Lord Zuko were able to transform the Fire Nation colonies into the United Republic of Nations, a society where benders and non-benders can live together in peace and harmony. They then called this place Republic City. After Aang accomplished so much in his life as completing peace in the world, having kids, and just overall real nigga shit, he passed away. Thus now leading to a new era of Avatar to be born and the cycle continuing. Fast forward some time and we cut to now a beautiful snowy night in the Southern Water Tribe. We then see a group of members who belong to the Order of the White Lotus approaching a hut that's in said village. Quick tidbit, the White Lotus is a group of people who do a bunch of philosophical shit, and one of their tasks is finding, training, and protecting the Avatar, just so you're caught up on everything. They enter the house and discuss with its participants? The fuck? They enter the house and discuss with the residents that they've been following failed rumors around the world of the returning of the new Avatar. The man and his wife answer and say, I'm happy that you found us because you can search no longer, because we now have found the next Avatar and it's our daughter. And of course the leader is like, what makes you so sure that your daughter is the Avatar? And without getting another fucking word out of his mouth, a huge hunk of rock just comes flying across the goddamn room. Now enters little baby Korra, who is fire bending, water bending, and earth bending off rip. And I ain't gonna lie, it's kind of fucking adorable. If you don't think it is, you probably just don't like cats or something. I don't know, criminal. Quick side note, a lot of people's problems is that Korra is able to bend all 3 elements out the gate. Granted, it's not great bending, but she's still bending them nonetheless. Assuming Korra has really sweet parents, spoiler, she has incredibly sweet parents, you would think once they found out their daughter was the Avatar, they would do everything in their power to help her learn how to control her powers. Being the Avatar is a huge title and a huge staple that people look up to before and after the war. So I'm assuming with her parents finding out that she's the Avatar, they are astounded, more or less than scared, that they can finally be able to support their world and their nation the way they should and the way they can because their daughter is the Avatar. Just throwing that out there because people have a problem with Korra knowing how to bend those elements, but sorry, excuse me for being a good parent, I guess. Let's get back to the story. We jump to a mere 13 years later. Avatar Korra is now officially a young adult woman. Well, more or less just a teenager. I think she's like 17 if my research worked correctly. She is now doing a little practice tournament showcasing her fire bending in front of the White Lotus and some of her teachers. And I ain't gonna lie, she whooping their ass. One thing I like to point out between Korra and Aang is where Aang always didn't really like to fight a lot. Korra, on the other hand, is always steady to whoop somebody's ass, which in the long run will come back to bite her in the ass, but at the time being, it looks cool as fuck. After training, one of the leaders of the White Lotus explains to her that she needs to practice more for spiritual training and not just her actual physical training because she's a little too resilient when it comes to her physical. She's very aggressive and very physical, and she needs to work on actually trying to become more Avatar and less of a warmonger. She claims she's not really good at the spiritual side of being the Avatar and claims that it would help her if she went to go train with Tenzin, who happens to be an airbender who's really good at the spiritual side when it comes to bending. Katara, who is standing not only 6 feet away from them, also implies that it will be a good idea for her to go train with Tenzin. Also, I probably should have said that, like, spoilers, I guess, because this is a sequel show, so I don't know what you thought was not going to happen, but it wasn't that. But Katara's here, and she's old, so yay. The leaders also agree that it'll be good for Korra to go train with Tenzin, which makes her happy, and she goes to tell Naga the good news. Naga is her animal companion in this show, and he is a polar bear dog, which is the coolest and sweetest thing I've ever fucking seen in a show. Because, you know, Aang had Appa, you know, the flying bison, and Momo, the flying bat lemur monkey thing. She has Naga, and we love Naga. Naga's a good boy. Anyway, some time has passed throughout the day, and Tenzin finally shows up on the flying bison with his wife Pema and his 3 kids, Iki, Janora, and Milo. They are all greeted by Katara, which I'm assuming is the first time the kids are meeting Katara, because Milo is fucking terrified of this old ass lady, which is so weird because that's his grandmother. I don't know why they haven't met their grandmother yet, but they haven't. Oh, by the way, yeah, that's their grandmother, which means Aang and Katara end up having kids, one of those kids being Tenzin, hence why he's an airbender. Dots connecting, I guess. During all this interaction, Pema states that Tenzin should probably tell Korra of the bad news. The bad news being that she cannot come back with him to Republic City to train. Tenzin explains that the city is in hella turmoil. There's a lot of unrest and uneasy things going around, and he doesn't want Korra to be around that. So he's like, you gotta stay here because you can't come back with me. They have dinner that night, and honestly, the same conversation happens at the dinner table. Korra, you can't come. We can't do none of this. And because of that, she storms off in a huff. Honestly, I would too, because like, what the fuck? The following morning, Tenzin and his family depart to go back home to Republic City, and Korra has to sit there and mope and be sad that she can't airbend train and go see new things. Again, I would be too. That night, Korra sneaks into Naga's chambers to take him on a joyride and possibly run away to Republic City to train with Tenzin without him knowing. But before she's able to leave, she is stopped by Katara, who also insists that it will be a good idea for her to leave because she understands that the Avatar's duty is to find their place in the world, and that's what Korra needs to do, and she can't do that being locked up in this goddamn amp. They share a heartfelt hug, and now Korra is now on a boat and on her way to Republic City. Once she's off the boat, she is sent flying, and now her and Naga are just running around the city. You have to understand that she's been cooped up in the camp for all of her life, so this is all new. The buildings, the people, the clothes, the environment, the smells. This is something unbeknownst to her, so now she's experiencing it all at once, and it is just a sensory overload. She's also broke and hungry, which means she has to figure out a way to get money and also figure out a way to get food, because she has none of that. It happens. Very relatable. She then goes to a park and starts to illegally fish, but while she's there at the park, she witnesses a protest happening over across the pond. It's something called a equalist rally, which these people are people who believe that bending should not be a thing because benders are superior and they like to take over people who are non-benders, which arguably understandable, but also shut the fuck up. While she's trying to fish and eat, she gets stopped by some guards because again, can't fish in the park. So now she's on the run again. After she loses the cops, she then stops at a local store and goes, hey, I'm looking for Airtip Island. Can you help me find it? The lady she asked was going to give her directions, but it stopped midway mid-sentence when a car comes speeding down the fucking street. The car stops at a shop right in front of them, and 3 men hop out to start harassing the shopkeeper and extorting him for money and protection. Korra doesn't take kindly to what these men are doing and decides to break their fucking femurs. And again, hands first, questions later. She approaches the thugs and they address themselves as the triple threat triads, and Korra just says, I don't give a fuck who you are.
Come to the street, bro. I will beat your motherfucking ass.
They then proceed to try to stop her, not knowing that she's the fucking Avatar. And so she stomps the brakes off these niggas. But during this whole fighting, she kind of does more harm than good and breaks up a lot of the street. I mean, she tears this street to shreds just fighting these 3 men. And because of that, the police show up and try to apprehend the men and end up also apprehending her because of the damage she did to the street. Also, these police are metal benders, which is something you briefly get in the last Airbender, but it became a whole huge thing here in Legend of Korra, is metal bending. She then tries to resist arrest and then runs away from the police, but it ultimately fails and she ends up being caught and then taken to the precinct. While at the police station, she is there being interrogated by Chief Lin Beifong, which, if you know correctly, you guessed it, is the daughter of Toph Beifong. Toph ended up having kids, but not with Sokka, apparently. That's sad.
So no head?
Nonetheless, she had kids, 2 daughters to be exact, and they bicker and go back and forth the entire time while in the interrogation room, and it's just a whole lot of hubbub, and it's too much happening at once. It is soon interrupted by Tenzin coming in and saving the day, trying to rizz up Lin because I guess they had a past fling. It's a whole drama thing. I'm telling you right now, the whole thing between Lin and Tenzin is crazy, but it's also really entertaining. Watch the show. Anyway, his rizzing just fails, and he insists on paying for the damages that Korra made made and ultimately just resides the situation by saying, hey, I'll just send her back home. Lin agrees and they both leave the precinct. Once at the docks, Tenzin's kids bombard Korra into thinking she's staying, but truthfully she's not staying and she doesn't want to break the news to the kids. Before she's able to board the boat and depart back home, Tenzin runs up and stops her, saying ever since that his father passed away, his father being Aang, Republic City has failed to ruin. He believed that halting Korra's training was upholding the legacy, but in truth reality, Korra is his legacy. Korra is the legacy that Aang left behind, and it would be wrong for Tenzin to just let her go. So he insists on her staying so he can train her to make her a better avatar. The next day, Korra and Tenzin hold a public announcement stating that Korra is the new avatar and she will be staying in Republic City to uphold the peace and harmony that's been set in through generations. And while that's happening, in a distant location, there are a group of men who are listening to this broadcast on the radio. One of these men is Amon, and Amon is actually the antagonist of Book 1. One of the henchmen turns off the radio and asks Amon what their next move is, that leading to Amon stating they are now going to accelerate their plans now that the avatar has been exposed. And that's the end of episode 1. That's the first episode of Legend of Korra. Book 1 is such a fire introduction, pun intended, on what to expect in the rest of this series and what's to come in the rest of this show. Then after that, Book 2 fucking ruins that shit entirely. And then Book 3 and 4 bring the show back to its glory and just let it shine. Oh, it's so good. If you just ignore the giant kaiju fight that is in Book 2, I'm telling you right now, the show is phenomenal.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
It took me a while to actually get into this show. When I finally did, it was ultimately a banger. It blew me out of the water, pun intended. And there isn't one main protagonist in all of these books. There are different antagonists in each book. So Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, and Book 4 all have a different villain. Book 3 being my personal favorite. Zahir might be the coolest villain of all time. I'm telling you right now, he is so awesome.
Hell, get off that nigga dick, bro. What is you doing?
What? No, you right. I was dick riding.
That's what I'm saying, bro. You gotta calm down with that shit.
Yeah, my fault.
But the show is honestly really good and I recommend watching it. The amount of times that Korra fails and loses in this show feels very grounded and very relatable because you don't always win on the first try. And that's Legend of Korra. I would talk about it more, but I want y'all to watch it. I might mess around and talk about Book 2, Book 3, and Book 4 just so y'all get a gauge of like what really goes on in this show, and I might completely go over the entirety of Book 1. Like a quick, you know what I mean? I don't know. Depending on how this video goes, right? I might just go over Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, and Book 4 all in their own video just so you can get a gauge of how good this actually show is. If you don't want to watch it, I'll make it easier for you. But until then, that's about it. I had a good time. This was very great. Enjoy your stay. Hope you enjoyed the video. Not the one I was going to do this month, but the one that I was going to do this month, I'm going to do next month, and I hope you enjoy it. I really don't know how to end my videos yet. This is awkward. Bye.